want you to picture two people, same city, same economy, same 24 hours in a day. One of them is stuck in the same relationship pattern, the same financial ceiling, the same addictions, the same story about who they are for 10, 15, 20 years. Now, the other one at some point hit a moment where everything changed. Not because their circumstances changed first, because something on the inside changed first, and the outside had no choice but to follow. That difference has a name that people have no idea exists, and it's called a paradigm shift. Now, we all have paradigms. We're stuck in them. That's why we don't change. We're not even aware that we have paradigms, stories about who we are, who the world is, who God is, what we're capable of. But what's coming for you right now is awareness. Because by the end of this podcast talk, you're going to understand exactly what that word means, why almost nobody actually understands it, where your paradigms came from before you were even old enough to consent to them. But most importantly, how you put your hand on the dial and change it all. We're going to work through that, because once you can do that, you don't need your circumstances to change. It's not cause and effect, it's causing effect. You see, you become the kind of person circumstances and environments can't hold down. So let's get into it. Once I became aware of paradigms, I taught people how to heal. And that's 25 years ago. And thousands of people have done so. But first, let's become aware of what a paradigm is. So the word gets thrown around so casually that we've almost lost what it actually means. But let's get to know it properly. A paradigm is a multitude of habits, really, because we become a habit. And as Joe Dispenza says, we've got to break the habit of being ourselves. So a paradigm is a multitude of those habits held together in your subconscious mind. That governs how you see and interpret the world, your environment. It's not one belief. It's a cluster, an entire operating system running quietly in the background. And it decides what you notice, what you ignore, what you believe is possible for you, and what you don't even think to try. Here's the part that people miss. Paradigm is not something that you think consciously. Very, very important. Paradigm is something that thinks you. It rules your life. If you're stuck, it keeps you stuck. If you're successful, it keeps you successful. You don't wake up and decide, today I'll believe money is hard to come by. You don't decide, today I will believe I'm not the kind of person who finishes what they start. If we wake up, which we're going to do today, those beliefs we will see were installed. Mostly before the age of 7. Mostly by people who loved you and had no idea what they were doing. And then they went underground. These thoughts, feelings, actions, behaviors, and consequences became automatic. And once a belief goes automatic, it stops looking like a belief. It starts looking dangerously like reality, like truth. Thinking of it like an operating system on a phone is a good idea. You don't see that operating system at all. You see the apps, you see the results, your relationships, your bank balance, your habits even. You track those. But those are just the apps. The paradigm is the operating system underneath. And every app is built on top of it. You can delete an app, change a habit, set a new goal, read a book, go to a seminar even, and feel motivated for 2 weeks, for example. But if the operating system hasn't changed, the old app just reinstalls itself That's why 95% of people who set a New Year's resolution are back to their old pattern by the end of February. They try to change the app. Can you see? They never touch the operating system. So that awareness can lead us to the next question. What is a paradigm shift then? Well, a paradigm shift is what happens when that underlying operating system itself gets rewritten. When that cluster of habitual thought, that's been running your life, gets replaced by a new one, deliberately, on purpose this time, by you. It's not positive thinking. I need you to hear that clearly because this gets confused constantly. Positive thinking is putting a nicer thought on top of the same old operating systems. It's decoration. A paradigm shift is renovation. It's deep. It goes underneath the floorboards and changes the foundations of itself. And here's what makes it different from ordinary change, because a paradigm shift, which I've studied for the last 15 years, doesn't feel like effort once it's happened. It feels like flow, right? Before the shift, the new behavior, saving money, staying calm under pressure, speaking up, finding yourself, staying sober, showing up as a leader, all takes willpower. Willpower doesn't last very long. It's a fight every single day. But after a shift, it isn't a fight anymore. It's flow. It's just who you are now. You don't decide not to smoke. You simply are not a smoker anymore. That's the signature of a genuine, awesome paradigm shift. And I've seen thousands of them. The behavior stops requiring discipline, willpower, and starts requiring nothing at all because the identity underneath it has changed. That's the difference between managing a problem and dissolving it. Yeah. We take our personality, that disordered personality, that mask we built, and we dissolve and include it in the person we're becoming. So where do these paradigms begin? It's important. Nobody arrives in adulthood with a blank operating system. Your paradigms started forming from the moment you could perceive your environment. And the overwhelming majority of the architecture was in place by around 7, long before you had the critical faculty to evaluate what you were being handed for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So realize when it comes to paradigms that 3 major forces built it. Repetition, emotional intensity, very important, identification with authority. Repetition, of course, is whatever was said or modeled to you again and again by parents and teachers about your worth, money, about what people like about us or don't like about us. It got grooved into the subconscious in ways that water grooves a canyon, really. Not through one dramatic moment, but through 1,000 ordinary ones. Then emotional intensity, a single moment of shame, fear, humiliation, or maybe even overwhelming love can imprint a belief permanently in one exposure. I always ask people, where were you when the towers went down? And they remember the room, the colors, what they were wearing, but yet they can't remember what they had for lunch last Thursday. It's because of the emotional intensity. If you were laughed at as a child in front of the class, in a fraction of a second, I'm not safe, I don't want to be seen as trying, that belief can run on for the next 40 years. And then thirdly, identification with authority. Because as children, we don't have the capacity to separate what my parent, teacher, pastor believes from what is actually true. We absorb the paradigms of the people we depend on for survival because agreeing with them was literally a survival strategy. So here's the sobering truth. You did not choose your original paradigms. It's not you. So you're a stranger to yourself. You wear masks. The paradigms were installed in you before you had a self capable of choosing, which makes you guilt-free, by the way, which means the version of you that has been running your adult life so far on autopilot was largely assembled by other people, most of whom were running paradigms installed by other people going back generations. But it's not a life sentence, that's the diagnosis only. And you cannot treat what you refuse to diagnose, what you refuse to become aware of, accept, and take new action from. So next, let's look at the paradigms of personality. Very, very important, because your personality is comprised of every thought, feeling, action, response, and behavior that you've ever had. Here's where it gets personal, because paradigms don't only govern money or habits, they govern identity itself. There's paradigms of personality, and they show up as the recurring roles you keep unconsciously casting for yourself. No matter how many times you change the external circumstances, they're still there. So we get stuck in a paradigm. You'll recognize a couple of them quite easily. The paradigm of unworthiness. I have to earn my right to take up space. It shows up as like chronic overgiving, an inability to receive things myself, and sabotage right at the point of breakthrough. Self-sabotage is huge. The paradigm of the protector, for example, if I stay in control, nothing bad can happen. But it shows up as rigidity, an inability to trust, and eventually, of course, exhaustion from carrying everything alone. There's paradigms of not enough, paradigms of performing, where I think without even knowing it, I'm only as valuable as my last achievement. But then it shows up as burnout and an identity that eventually collapses the moment the external validation stops. Can you see the paradigms of personality here? We've all got 10 paradigms of personality. 10. And you need to know what they are. You need to become aware of what they are. If you suffer depression, anxiety, any kind of ADHD, OCD, you're prone to burnout, disappointments, being stuck, addictions, whatever it's going to be. You need to know what those 10 paradigms are. There's only 10. The controller, the perfectionist, neurotic, codependent, eccentric. Then at number 6, we've got the victim. We all have that one. The actor, where we are not authentic, of course, until we wake up. At pathway 8, we've got a pleaser. 9, a judge who doesn't have a judge. And at 10, the anxious personality mask. And what you've got to understand is that for each of those 10 paradigms that were built to protect us, there's a new paradigm, a paradigm underneath that gets us out of it. So the first one is letting go of the controller. That's the paradigm that we've got to let go of first. Remember, in the East, it's all about letting go, not clinging. Letting go of the controller while recovering a sense of self-love, that self-worth that is missing when we perform, when we protect, when we're in paradigms of not enough. Recovering a sense of self-love is first. So can you see it's a map? The paradigm process is a map. 10 paradigms that keep us stuck and 10 paradigms that set us free. Self-love, gratitude, surrender, connection, certainty, resilience, presence, self-regulation at 8. At 9, wisdom, and 10, letting go of that anxious mask and recovering a sense of courage, which means heart, EQ. And when you open your heart, do not harden your heart. When you open your heart, your mind opens and opportunities present themselves with synchronicity. So know the paradigms and know how to set yourself free from them. Because those 10, I call the whole architecture of these patterns your ego insurgents. They're ego defensive, they're there to protect you. But the survival-based identities of these 10 that took command in childhood to keep you safe and never got the memo that the threat is over have to go. They're not villains. I mean, they were competent bodyguards for a child who had no other defense. The problem is that you're not a child anymore, and the bodyguard is still running the company. So just remember that defense is the first act of war. And if you're at war with yourself, the world, other people, with your finances, if you're at war with your mental health, emotional health, you've got to not be defensive. So you've got to get rid of those 10 ego insurgents. Every one of these personality paradigms had a job once. The tragedy isn't that they exist. The tragedy is when they're still making decisions for a fully grown adult who no longer needs them. And calling it just my personality is sickness. It isn't your personality. It's your paradigm. Wearing your personality as a costume. So let's move on to how to become aware of our paradigms. You cannot shift what you can't see, what you're not aware of. And paradigms, by design, are invisible to the person running them. So awareness arrives through basically 4 doorways. Repetition, which is like affirmation, so important. Repetition of results. When the same outcome shows up in different relationships, jobs, we must realize that these are not coincidences. These things are showing up because you're the common denominator. It's not the environment. So that's very important. You also need, when you become aware of your paradigms, to interrupt the patterns. A crisis, a diagnosis, some kind of rock bottom, anything violent enough to crack that automatic pilot for a moment and force conscious attention onto something that used to run silently. So this is where, when these things happen, people meet themselves, these paradigms, for the first time and go, hold on a second, that's me. Suffering has a way of being an honest teacher when nothing else can get through. So great suffering forces us to see these masks and the paradigms that we need to shift. But speaking of shifts, how do we make these shifts happen? Well, awareness opens the door. We know that now. But this is actually what walks through it. So how you make a paradigm shift happen? Name it precisely when you become aware of it. Vague awareness, I have money issues. I've never been able to hang on to money or make it. It's always a stuckness. Vague awareness changes nothing. So we want precise awareness. I unconsciously believe that having more than my father had would be a betrayal of him. Something like that could be running through your mind subconsciously. But once you become aware of it, you can work with it. So a paradigm loses power in direct proportion to how clearly you can name it. Remember, where focus goes, energy flows. So when we know the cause, we can name the effect. 2, decide on the new paradigm in specific terms. Again, focus, be specific. Not I want to be more confident. That's still an app, not a new operating system. So decide, I am someone whose worth was never up for negotiation. Remember to write these paradigms down. It's powerful. Because when you do, you're choosing in the present tense as if it's already true. So you're bringing it out into reality. Because a paradigm shift is not a plan to become something. It's an act of, sort of claiming that you are already the change that you want to become. 3rd, feed it with repetition and emotion. Remember, you've got to elevate your emotions on purpose. Don't stay depressed. Elevate it. You'll be surprised how easy it is when you become aware of what's holding you back. It loses power. Know thy enemy, because when you do, the enemy loses power. Okay? Old paradigms got installed through repetition and emotional intensity when you were young. So just remember, the new one gets installed in exactly the same way, except this time you are the author instead of the accident. Daily, deliberate repetition of the new identity combined with genuine emotion and feeling behind it. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, said Patanjali. It's what moves a belief from the conscious mind, where it's fragile, down into the subconscious, where it becomes automatic. We call this the pain of the adult learner, having to go through that practice and repetition until it becomes automatic and subconscious. That's the breaking of the habit of being yourself, the old self that doesn't work, the persona, the mask, not the real you. It's construction work. 4, I want you to act as evidence, not as proof seeking. So what that means is every time you act in alignment with the new paradigm, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when the old pattern would have won, you are not trying to prove something to yourself. In other words, you're in a situation, you get triggered, you want to control, you want to send that message, no, you replace it with self-love. Keep yourself first place, keep self-regulated, love yourself. You don't feel less than. That's the old paradigm. You don't feel less than because someone said you're not doing your job properly. Because they said that, the old paradigm gets triggered and goes off. No, not anymore. You maintain self-regulation, self-love. So every time you act in alignment, every single time you act in alignment with the new paradigm, especially when it's uncomfortable, you are creating that new operating system, a new data point in the subconscious mind. So it's powerful. And you get to practice it every day with every instance. So, and then 5, lastly here, expect resistance. It's not failure, it's resistance, lessons, not failures. I'm telling you now that you don't expect to change in a place of comfort. That old paradigm does not go quietly. It got you through your childhood, but no, it's wanting to still protect. It's actually smothering, but when it resists through, say, self-sabotage, through an old craving, through the voice in your head that says, who do you think you are? This isn't going to work, all those things. It's the old paradigm. It's resistance. So recognize that resistance is coming and take it for what it is. Name it. It's resistance. It's evidence. It's not you. You don't fight the resistance. You simply keep choosing the new pattern until the old one runs out of fuel. So that's the actual mechanics of what I call the paradigm process. Easily understood now. It's about, moving a person from that survival-based pattern of ego insurgence, that defend, I suppose, and then shifting into a new paradigm, which is your authentic, sacred self, that version of you that was never actually damaged. Your soul, all is well with your soul. It's never damaged, only covered over. And, you've probably had a deep yearning all your life. We all do. That the soul could sort of effervescently bubble up to the surface. And that is what's happening. What you've been waiting for the whole time is for you to stop defending the old story, the old paradigm, and start living the true one, the one you're meant to live. So that's alignment, connection, synchronicity. It's reality. Who you are is infinite, unlimited, and unbounded. So, you set yourself free here. Okay. And then essentially the last part of what I want to talk to you about, the paradigms of personality, is what exactly changes when the shift happens, what to expect. Well, here's what I need you to understand, because it's the whole reason this matters. You're not one shift away from a slightly better version of your current life. It's important. You're one shift away from a different life entirely. So what needs to change is everything, because your paradigm isn't just influencing your results. It's generating every single one of them all day, every day, whether you're paying attention or not. Change the paradigm around money for yourself, and you don't just get more money. You get a completely different relationship to risk, to giving, to security, to your own capability, your own worth. You see the difference. Change the paradigm of unworthiness, for example. And you don't just get more confidence, you get relationships that no longer require you to shrink, a career that no longer requires you to overperform, burn out, and sort of develop a nervous system that can't ever rest. Yeah. That dopamine hit is so needed, and you never get any fulfillment. It's awful. It's like pushing a rock up a hill all day long. Change the paradigm, for example, that you inherited about addiction, about being the difficult one or the black sheep or the victim, about what your family said to you, that you'd never amount to nothing, maybe. And you don't just change the behavior. Huh, not at all. You change your bloodline story going forward. Huge difference, because the children watching you are absorbing a new operating system in real time, the same way you once absorbed the old one. Can you see how you're changing the world here? It's amazing. It's like contagious, really. Learning how to paradigm shift your personality is absolutely huge. So 15 years ago, the penny dropped with that awareness, and we developed that program. Identified the enemy, the 10 ego insurgents that hold you in those broken paradigms, limited paradigms, and the 10 pathways out of them. This is the honest scale of what's on the table here. Think big, because it's not going to be a better morning routine, not a temporary motivation spike. No ways. This is a different foundation entirely. And every future decision you will ever make, remember what the Bible says. Build your house on sand. When trouble comes, it's going to get washed away. Build your foundation on rock, which is what you're doing here. Totally new foundation. And you're going to thrive. No more survive. Thrive. I want you to remember also, you didn't choose the paradigm that's been running your life so far. So drop the guilt and the shame, and I haven't accomplished enough and I've wasted time. That's all old paradigm stuff. Now you get to choose the one that runs the rest of your life. Look into how to do it and do it. Totally new paradigm. Half measures will get us nowhere. So it's not a self-help idea at all. All those self-help books, thousands of them, they have to go. It's quite literally the most consequential decision available to a human being the day you decide to wake up. Wake up, realize you're in a paradigm, a story, and then you drop it. You create a new story. So don't ask what you need to do differently today. That's not it. Ask what you need to become, because you're becoming unlimited. And then start feeding that new, totally new identity on purpose with everything you've got. Because the new identity is not a mask. It's not a personality. Your new identity is I, the real you, the I am. I am powerful. I am certain. I am built on a solid foundation. That I is your authentic self, your sacred self. So not am I worthy, am I, flip it around. I am in a new paradigm. Ask what you need to become, and you're going to become unlimited. That's the shift, and it changes everything.